Hey everyone, I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. I am just dropping this special little clip into all the episodes. So, no matter what episode you're listening to, this is actually pretty current as of July 2024. I wanted to come on here and just say a big thank you to Earworthy because the Life Shift podcast was just named the best overall podcast of the year in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. And you've probably seen some articles written about the Life Shift podcast before, written by Earworthy. And now he is launching from his online publication, he is launching these yearly winners of independent podcast awards. And these are specifically for indie podcasters. We are those that wear all the hats. We create the show. Some people write the show. We're producers, sound engineers. We troubleshoot all the tech. We do any kind of research if we need to. We host the shows. We distribute the shows. We do all the things that relate to our shows because we love it. And it's so nice to see my name in a list with some other amazing podcasts like Multispective, which won Best Life Lessons Podcast. Salad with a Side of Fries won Best Health Podcast. Bippity Boppity Business won Best Business Advice Podcast. And there are so many more. And so I just want to come on here and say thank you to Earworthy for not only doing these awards every year and just honoring some of us indie podcasters that sometimes feel like we're just shouting into the void, but we're not. We're just doing what brings us joy, and hopefully through that work it brings other people joy. In my case, for the Life Shift, I hope that each episode finds the ears that needed to hear it the most so that they feel a little less alone in their circumstance. But also, Earworthy writes all these amazing publications pretty much weekly, every week, every weekday, I should say, where he writes on Blogger, Medium, Substack, Tumblr, Vocal, Many Stories, and for other places. And he really just highlights the independent podcasters. So thank you, Frank, for everything you do with Earworthy and for recognizing all of us in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. If you'd like to read more, please head to medium.com/EAR hyphen WORTHY. Thanks again and enjoy this episode. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Hello, my friends. I am here with Dr. J. Rodríguez, and we are going to have a conversation today about his pivotal moment. I appreciate you being here. To be fair to everyone else, you are one of the few people that I don't know personally that has been on this show. So I really appreciate that. And what I find exciting about that is that I really know nothing more than what I've read about you on LinkedIn. So this conversation will be fun for me because I really like to just listen and see where we go. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be with you. I saw your mission, connected with you on LinkedIn, and I was just really excited about the opportunity to share a story about connection and authentic conversations that we all need to have. So I appreciate the opportunity.
For sure. And I love the things that you do share on LinkedIn. There's always such positivity and honesty in it. So I think this conversation is going to be really cool. And I have a feeling that this conversation will probably talk about the pivotal moment that made you the way that you are, at least on LinkedIn and what you're sharing there. So maybe you can give us just a little bit about who you are, and then we can go into kind of what your life looked like before this pivotal moment and this shift in time for you.
Well, thank you. I am a consultant. I also teach in Southern California. So I'm a professor. That's my day job, as I like to say. And I also work with organizations and different stakeholders to create cultures of belonging. I talk about it as the power of solidarity in the moments of living. And basically, it's what we're doing right now, creating moments of conversation where we are expressing to each other what's really going on. vulnerability, authenticity, and through those conversations, building a sense of belonging, that we belong to each other, really through the power of conversation, having an open conversation about those things that we should be talking about, but we're not talking about for obvious reasons, right? We feel unheard, or we feel unseen, or we feel that we would be too vulnerable, or we feel that it's not safe. That's a very legitimate reason not to have a conversation. So I really appreciated hearing that in your mission statement, and that's really aligned with what I do. So I thought it would be a perfect conversation to have.
That's such a cool thing that you're doing, and I wish more people would do it. You see on social media and places similar to, LinkedIn even, where people feel very performative, right? We feel like we can only share the wins. We can only share when we're having a good day. But unfortunately or fortunately, I find my deepest connections with people are not in those big giant win moments, but rather in the harder, icky spaces, the ones that we are conditioned not to talk about. So I love that you're doing that. Do you find the same?
I totally find the same thing. And we see it at times on LinkedIn as well, where someone shares a very personal story or a struggle or challenge that is really rocking their world. And they just are very vulnerable and they share it. And the outpouring of support is unbelievable, especially in particular social circles that are all about support. So I see that, and that's a beautiful testament to what we're talking about here, is having those authentic moments where we're talking about our essential humanity, right? We all go through struggle. We all go through adversity. And I think that that's what brings us together, right? We come to understand that we are not alone because we are united in that struggle, in that suffering, in that moment of humanity where I say to you, hey, I'm just like you. I'm having a hard time. This is just really, really difficult. Can we have an honest conversation about how this hurts, or how this is making me feel, or how maybe you can support me to make it better, maybe just by having this conversation. So those pivotal moments are so significant because they bring us closer together in ways that we wouldn't expect prior to that moment.
Right. I always find it so interesting when you do see these vulnerable posts because I love seeing them and I love engaging with them. And I think, like you said, it kind of creates that feeling of connection. But it's so interesting that most of those posts have like a disclaimer or they have a, I'm sorry that I have to share this. And at some point, we just need to be proud that we are humans that are having some kind of emotional experience, right? It's okay. We're not meant to be 100% happy, perfect all the time.
Right, it's this stereotype, right? The illusion of perpetual perfection, right? Which is an illusion. And I think that that's really what brings us together, is we shatter that illusion, and then all of a sudden someone says, oh wow, I can be real with Matt because he's been real with me. I can be honest with Matt because he's been honest with me. I can take off my performance mask with Matt because Matt has created a space for me to bring my authentic self in this moment. I know that Matt is not threatening, right? I know he's not going to judge me because of the very nature of his disclosure or his vulnerability. He's shown me his belly, so I know that he's not going to attack me. And it's this whole dynamic really about power, right? And about being hurt and about being wounded and trying to prevent that wounding from occurring, because I don't want to put myself out there if you're not going to create a safe space for me to have that rich, honest, supportive conversation. And again, those are the things that really bond us to each other, because we remember and we acknowledge our essential humanity, and that ultimately brings us together.
I mean, part of my whole, uh, as you said, mission for this podcast is building that community, and really, honestly, it's selfish in a way. As a child losing a parent when I was about 8 years old, the only thing I think I needed at that time was to feel that I wasn't the only person that's ever lost a parent. And when you're in a situation, especially that young, it's hard to understand that you aren't the only one facing that. And so building the opportunity for people to just hear stories that may not exactly align with what they're going through, but that can connect with something that's being said is really what keeps me going with this podcast. And so I want to get into your story. I don't necessarily want to just talk about me, but maybe because yours is cool. It led to some really cool opportunities for you, and kind of created the person you are today, or what I'm assuming. So maybe you can kind of paint the picture of what your life was like before that moment that really put you in a new direction.
Yeah, so I imagine myself or remember myself walking into this huge lecture hall on campus where I was a college student, and walking in, hearing all the clamor of students talking, a lecture hall with 275 people. And of course, you're waiting with anticipation for the professor to come on in and start the show. And just as the course was starting, or just as it was time to start the class, the professor walks in, takes the stage, and says, "Hello, my name is Dr. Ellis Hayes, and I'm your instructor." And I remember just being very moved by his performance, his dynamism, his charisma. And I go, this guy is is different. And he just had a way of moving in the world that was very welcoming, very commanding. And I was this lowly undergraduate. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I come from a family of exiles and immigrants, and English is my second language. So I felt like an outsider in many ways, like we all do. And I was shy. I was very introverted. I didn't own my voice. I didn't even know I had a voice. It was one of those moments that I'm sure we all have in life. And then he started to describe how he was starting a seminar business, how he was inviting students to come to an introductory meeting to see if we would like to be involved. And I went and took the initial training, and through a series of events, I became a trainer for that particular program. And that really opened the door to going on to graduate school, to earning a PhD, and really to coming back to the university and teaching the class that he had taught for over 20 years. And it created this wonderful legacy or trajectory of an experience that I couldn't have imagined. And I really do believe that it was because of that initial interaction with him creating the opportunity to be a part of something that he was putting together, that he was a part of, and then inviting me, obviously, to be a part of that plan, and acknowledging my unique contributions to that process, really opening of the door through experiences, through connection, through honoring, and saying, hey, you can do this too, right? And that's really my life before, in a sense, prior to the pivotal moment, which I'm sure we're going to get to in a minute. But I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, no. So so you came into this classroom and were kind of just like a lot of students, honestly, as a wallflower sitting there scared, and all the things we were just talking about, not being vulnerable. Is just like you were the epitome of that as a college student, right? And insecure and not ready to do it. What made you be a part of what he was putting together? Was there something that like triggered that? I know it's not your main shift, but there's a difference, right? Jumping into that.
Sure, sure. I was just drawn to it. I think we all have These little moments where you just know that something is for you. For example, our interaction. I just knew that I wanted to be on the podcast with you. I didn't know why. I just didn't question it. I just went with it, and I connected with you, sent you a DM, and boom, we put it together, and here we are, right? So it was very similar back then. I just connected with him, and he reciprocated, right? Because it's a two-way street. I may find that I have this connection or this bond or this yearning to be in your life or to be a part of what you're doing, but you may not. And so the fact that he reciprocated, right, and welcomed me created an opportunity where I had a sense of belonging. I had a sense that I was in a place where I was, acknowledged for who I was. My voice was important. My voice was honored. My voice was respected. And it's something that I hadn't really experienced before because I was, as you said, the college student wallflower who's just a number in a room in a sea of
Right.
275 people. So, in that environment, in that context, you could see how most people would feel like a wallflower or out of sort or not really important. You're just a number on somebody's roster, right? So the insignificance, right? I talk about it as, communities and people in the world creating or inventing insignificance, right? We invent insignificance all the time by making people irrelevant, right? We make people unseen. Yeah, just a number, right? And we all feel that. And I think when we connect with others, like I connected with Ellis, like I'm connecting here with you, there's a sense of belonging that calls us to be a part of something larger with that person, with that institution, with the program, with the project, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it builds that sense of safety in which you can truly be who you are and contribute the things that you know how to do. Because thinking about I don't ever want to be a number in a lecture hall again. 275 people around you. Even still, at what I know now, there's still an insignificance, I think, but also that fear of you don't want to speak up because everyone is listening. And if you don't have the right answer or the quote unquote right answer, there's that, societal shame that comes along with it, whether that's put on ourselves or not. But
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
there. It certainly is. So you found this space that you felt safe and you felt community. And it sounds like he kind of was a mentor of some sort.
He was. I remember when we started working together, there was this moment where he turned to me and he said, I like you. You have an intuitive grasp of the obvious, right? Right. And I wasn't quite sure if that was like a put down or a compliment, right? But later
Did you
on,
ever figure that out?
I did, and that was a bit of the pivotal moment. So I may be stealing your thunder, but there was that great line, and at the moment, in that moment, I felt like Master Yoda had entered the building with some kind of, Jedi mind trick koan or something, and I paused. Even back then, when I didn't know anything about mindfulness, I took a second look at my first thought. Right, I paused. I took a deep breath and I turned to him and I said, Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. And I asked him, Do you know what that means? And he said, No. So I translated and I said, It means tell me who you hang out with and I'll tell you who you are. And what I'm saying is, you're hanging out with me and I'm hanging out with you. So maybe we have something in common. When I said that, it was like crickets. You could hear a pin drop. And he took a pause, a deep breath. He looked into my eyes, and with this tenderness that touched my heart, he said, What is not so clear to the many is oh so clear to the few like you. And again, it was like a moment of silence where Master Yoda came in one more time with a Jedi mind trick. And what I noticed in that moment is that he noticed me, I noticed him. We were noticing the comedy in the conversation. Nobody got upset. I could have gotten really upset and gotten really triggered, but I turned it around and we had a conversation about how we were having a conversation. We sometimes call that meta communication. Hey, you just noticed something about me, and I noticed that you noticed, and now we're having a conversation about noticing. Right? And it was really cool, right? It just shattered all the awkwardness, it shattered all the weird performative things that we get into, all the hangups, because we were just two guys realizing that we had just responded to each other in a really cool way. And we wanted to acknowledge that beautiful process of having the courage to be vulnerable, to have a conversational moment that worked for both of us, and then move on in a spirit of community, of connection, and of belonging.
Oh, for sure. That it created that bond. And I mean, I guess it probably sets the tone for everything that comes after, right? How did that particular moment change that relationship, like working relationship or friendship?
Yeah, we became lifelong friends, lifelong business partners. We developed a training program together. We did consulting for a variety of organizations. And when he passed away, I went to when he was passing away. I went to go visit him, and I remember holding his hand, in the hospital bed, and just reaching out to him very tenderly. And I said, Ellis, do you feel that? And I was just touching his hand. And he said, yeah. And I go, what what do you feel? What is the feeling? And I always remember what he said. He just took a deep breath in that state and said, it feels like love. And we both cried in that moment. And as I'm recalling that now, I start hearing myself get kind of choked up because it was such a powerful and beautiful moment that we don't often acknowledge, a spirit, especially in our society around death and dying and our perceptions of death and dying, and something that we don't want to look at and something that we don't want to see. But it was beautiful. It shattered that illusion of separateness at a whole other level, right? Where I felt this otherworldly connection with him. And then he said, please take care of my class. Because he knew I was teaching at the university at that time, and he was very attached to his course and the way he had planned it. And he knew that I was capable of doing that. So I said, yeah, hey, I got you. And he passed away the day after. And a week after his passing, his daughter gave me a call and said that I was the last person that he spoke to. And I realized that his last words were maybe his last wish. And so I've always felt so honored and so blessed to be able to be teaching that class today, because it goes back to that history, that legacy of a man who touched my life in ways that I can't really articulate, but created an opportunity for that legacy to continue through the work that I do and through the person that I've become.
The guy who gave that kid a chance, now you have the opportunity to honor him while also enjoying what you're like. I mean, if we all could be so lucky to, one, have the baton passed to us in such a way, but also to kind of live your truth, and by doing that, making someone happy. Those last moments, those are tough. Those last moments,
Yeah.
and I was really close after my mom died. I got really close to my grandmother, and when she was sick, I had I want to say the opportunity, the great opportunity to be by her bedside until the last moment. I've never, I mean, I'm sure you that experience will never leave you. But for me, it was, I call it devastatingly beautiful,
Yeah.
because to just be a part of that and to be part of those last conversations, and I don't know, it's indescribable, as you say. You can't really put words to it, but I know what you're saying when you think back, and it's like it's clear. Every moment of that piece is probably super clear for you.
Yeah, it gets etched in the tapestry of my heart, to use a different metaphor, forever. And that brings us back to the experience in the present, almost
Mm.
as if for the first time. And then it creates an opportunity, for me to tap into your experience with a very similar dynamic, with your grandmother, in terms of connecting with her during final moments. And again, going back to what first started this conversation, is all these points of connection, right? All these points of humanity that facilitate conversations that we don't normally have, but that we're having, and bring us closer together.
And you know what's interesting too, and I'm so glad that you're on here, because society, and there's so many societal norms, and especially for men, and having these conversations about anything that's vulnerable. I think it's getting better now, I hope. But even growing up, I felt that, there were certain things that I was supposed to do, and there were certain things that I was not supposed to do. And one of which was cry or feel any kind of strong emotion. And to hear a grown man speak about the fondness and the relationship that you had with your mentor, I think is important for people to hear, because we should be talking about things like that more, because you're not the only one that has a mentor and has that connection, but you're probably part of the few that talks about it in such a loving way. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. And it goes back to, right, what Ellis said, right? The few who do, or the few who are willing to honor that voice, or the few that are willing to have that conversation. And by doing that, really creating a space for others to do the same, right? Which is part of why we're sharing this conversation is, hey, it's okay to get emotional. It's okay to talk about your connection with another person, and the vulnerability that you shared, and even okay to say, I don't even know what to say, Matt. It was like undescribable. I don't have words for it. The words aren't coming out. Even to have that moment of non-expression, or a realization that I'm maybe not being very articulate right now, but I'm being very real.
Something's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. I, I'm kind of like, I am a little bit speechless, in the sense that I don't know that I've ever really had the opportunity to hear someone explain a connection like that, especially to grown men. I just think I think it's great, and I think that we need to get more of these stories out there, that it's totally fine. It doesn't make you any less of a man that you had a connection with another one. There's lots of guy trips going on out there.
Of course, exactly. We have all these guide trips about what it means to be powerful, or what it means to be macho, or what it means to own your power, or whenever you share a moment of vulnerability that shows weakness for some reason. And it takes an incredible amount of courage to be able to stand in front of another human being and share the authenticity of your story. It's very, very, very difficult. It's very courageous to do so because of all the threats and the norms that we're violating, really, by taking that position. And that's part of the reason why I'm enjoying this conversation and wanting to do it so much, is because we're rupturing, right? We're being subversive. We're taking on the norm and by doing something different, right?
By
Right?
doing something real.
Yeah, right, exactly. The norm isn't completely useless. It could always be used as a bad example,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
which is something that Dr. Ellis Hayes would say, right? He would say, that thing, whatever it is not completely useless. It can always be used as a bad example. And I
I
just
like it.
think, those norms about masculinity, those hyper rigid norms about masculinity, are not completely useless. They can always be used as a bad example because masculinity, femininity is on a continuum, right? And there's all these valid forms of expression that we don't allow to be because that box makes us uncomfortable. And it makes us uncomfortable because we've decided to be uncomfortable and because we're made or positioned to feel uncomfortable by the norms of our society.
Yeah. I mean, to put a button on that, to me, what is seen as weakness in vulnerability is actually a strength, which is what you said. It takes courage. It's a strength. It's not, I mean, it's a lot harder to share the tough parts than it is to blast out the amazing parts. And so I do think that's a strength. But I want to talk a little bit more about kind of a couple, what happened after. What he passed away and now it's just you, right? What do you do with that?
Exactly. So clearly, after his passing, there was a long period of mourning and grief, and grief is this emotion or sensation or feeling or process that seems unending because it can go on and on and on. And again, going back to the normative stereotypes in society, well, you should be done with your grief by now. Or, toughen up, stop crying. What's wrong with you? Oh, it'll get better. All those stereotypical responses. And sometimes it doesn't, forever. It might be a wound or a sensation or a feeling that stays with you for the rest of your life or transforms in some way that you couldn't imagine. So my first response to your question is that there was a feeling of grief and loss. And then I was very fortunate to be working in a department that allowed me to take over his class, and that's the class that I'm teaching today. So it's been one of the greatest honors of my life to be able to teach that class, to continue that legacy of impacting students and working with them to talk about exactly what you and I are talking about: communication and conversations, and how to communicate more effectively, and how to connect with other people through self disclosure, through bonding, through comforting communication, through empathy, right? So that has been my mission. And now I'm trying to expand that mission beyond the confines of the university to reach out to organizations and individuals to share that message on a broader scale, because I think in our world, we need that discussion about empathy, about comforting, about vulnerability, about those kinds of conversations that bring us to a sense of belonging.
Do you feel that, oh, I don't know what you were like before, but do you think that him passing that baton to you gave you more confidence? Do you feel like you did that push you out into the front more? Were you both kind of running at the front?
I think we were both running at the front in our own different ways. Obviously, he had retired for a number of years, and I had been working as a professional for a long time. But I think that it really created a catalyst, if you will, for occupying that role more profoundly, right? It's like the baton has been passed to you. what do you do with this sacred responsibility? What do you do to honor this beautiful legacy that someone out of the abundance of their heart has shared with you very vulnerably, very honestly, very tenderly, pretty much at the moment of their passing, which you couldn't have predicted before, you know? And that creates this incredible catalyst around change because responsibility becomes an issue, right? Now you're responsible. I felt responsible, right? I felt
Yeah.
responsible for honoring a particular legacy or a particular way of being, a particular way of moving in the world. And I think I was always that person, but I guess in that moment, it gave me permission to be much more of that person in the future, right? The person that I've always wanted to be, who I always was, but I needed an opportunity, a platform, a setting, and someone to recognize, right?
Right.
Someone to
It's like
recognize that
permission.
potential, exactly, bring us in and say, hey, here's a stage. Because I think that's really important, especially in mentoring relationships, especially in relationships with someone that you admire, that that person not only admires you, but welcomes you in, invites you, and gives you a very warm and non-oppressive form of permission, right? It's not so much a permission as it is a beautiful invitation to occupy a stage, right? They're stepping out of the stage and giving you the stage.
It's like an introduction.
Yeah, yeah, and that introduction is really empowering because the weird power dynamics of typical recognition aren't there because it's a very genuine invitation that allows you to take over and they're not hovering over you like a helicopter parent, right?
So were there things that you did after that you necessarily wouldn't have done when he was still around?
I think that I continued doing features of things that I had done all along, like, teaching and things of that sort. But I think that the difference is really just kind of carrying on that legacy, right? And I don't know that it was necessarily a different activity per se, but to really honoring that legacy of the work that we started so many years ago, and occupying that space, taking on that role, and then doing it for other people, right? That's I think very key, is not just taking on a role and whatever, becoming famous or becoming the leader or becoming the person in power, but then taking on that legacy and doing the same thing for other people. So mentoring other students, becoming an ally for people that perhaps don't see themselves as being seen.
I want to get to the point you had the opportunity to share part of this story in a larger platform that other people would be so excited to do. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I got it. I got it. Yes, that was many moons later, right? Long, long ago, in a place not too far from my heart. I recall this memory of this conversation with Ellis and the interaction with him, and that created a trajectory many years later to do a TED talk. And that was around 2017, I believe 2018. I was struggling to come up with a topic because people think, oh my gosh, doing a TED talk, oh, you've been lecturing for so many years, it'll be easy for you. You can do this. And I didn't believe them because I'd never done a TED talk before, and I'd never, been in front of this huge audience with a counter counting down. You only have 18 minutes with big, huge lights in your face blinding you because you can't see the audience. At least I couldn't. And I've never been in that type of an environment. So I was really not ready. So I hired a voice coach. I did a lot of preparation. I went through 22 drafts of the manuscript. I recorded myself. I talked to myself in the car. You name it, I did it. And that created a trajectory to share that message with a huge audience, right? Because TEDx has this call to action, which is sharing stories that are significant, right? Sharing ideas that are worthy of being shared, right? And that's also a huge responsibility because I didn't just want to talk about something trivial. I wanted to be an idea worth sharing or an idea worth promoting. And I thought, wow, the connection with Dr. Hayes, the impact that it had on my life, which you and I have talked about, and how that led me to think about connecting and responding. And I call it the power of solidarity in the moments of life, which are points of connection, points of belonging, and little moments that we think are insignificant, but boom, they create this huge catalyst, this huge shift that is many times seen in the moment as insignificant or it's no big deal or I can't talk about it. But then you look back, especially when you look now in the present, back in the past, you start to see how that event unfolded or created a catalyst for the opportunities that you've had in life, for the person you've become, for the things that you've done. And that was very true for me. So the TED Talk was a way of putting that together in a 18-minute presentation where I told the story much like I shared with you here with different details, and then talked about how that evolved into me creating a theory about communication, looking at three features, which I call identity, intentionality, and agency. And identity can be a lot of things to a lot of people, but for me, identity is the idea that you are a certain character in every situation. And you might ask yourself, who am I in this moment, or who am I being, right? What kind of a person would I like to be? Number two is intentionality, which is the idea that you are open to the world and you have a sense of purpose. And you might ask yourself, what's my purpose? What's my goal? What's my outcome? And lastly, there's agency, which is the capacity to act or to take action. And in this regard, you could ask yourself, what can I do? How can I move in the world? Or what can I do that is helpful? And at the intersections of identity, intentionality, and agency, that's where I find my work. That's what I do every day. That's what I'm doing with you here. That's what I think we're doing together. We're saying, who can we be as human beings for the purpose of expressing an authentic, vulnerable conversation that's important? And how do we do that in ways that are useful, helpful, and productive so that other people could be invited into this moment and feel welcomed or feel inspired or feel hopeful that they are not alone, that they have value, that they are here for a reason, maybe a reason that they don't understand, but will soon understand because they're participating in this conversation. They're here with us vicariously through the wonders of technology, and they're saying yes. And they're having a moment of connection where they're connected vicariously with us, but they're also connected with themselves, right? And I think that that becomes a very powerful catalyst for connecting with others, right? Connecting with ourselves, connecting with our own humanity, and then being able to share that with other people.
Yeah, it's two thoughts on that. One, how it's almost like the TED Talk gave you the challenge or opportunity for you to fully flesh out your idea and to really be able to articulate it in a way that is impactful. Because, I mean, all of us, when we're given these constraints, it's like, I can't do it. And then when we do it, we have a much better, solid understanding of the direction we want to go or what we want to talk about. So I think that. Do you think that's true? Do you think that TED Talk helped you kind of form?
Yes, I think you hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the head. It helped me form that.
Right. So it's like an opportunity to do
Yeah,
that.
right, right. It's like, this conversation that we're having is helping us formulate, right, our process, right, which we couldn't have predicted at the beginning, right? I didn't prepare for 4 hours. You didn't prepare for 4 hours with some scripted canned routine. This is live, in living color,
Right.
fresh. And we couldn't have predicted it, but now it's taken form. And that form has become a site for us to understand what we're doing, and how we're connecting, and how we're talking, and how we're being, and the kind of conversation that we're capable of having. So yeah, the TED Talk really helped crystallize these three ideas, and I'd had them for a while, but I hadn't put them together in a way that I could speak about, right? I had it all in writing, but it wasn't readily available to be spoken, to be voiced, especially not in public, right? With a massive audience beyond the audience that was right in front of me, a huge audience on the internet, which is rather daunting and scary.
Forever.
Exactly.
Like this episode. Another thing that struck me too, though, is when you were talking about kind of formulating your TED Talk, you talked about how people don't necessarily understand that sometimes even the most seemingly insignificant moments can be those triggers. And that's kind of what a lot of the conversations on this podcast have ended up being. Is I'll have someone on, okay, a couple things. I'll have someone on and they'll think that their pivotal moment is X, Y, and Z. And then we have this conversation, and through the conversation, we discover that no, that actual moment was like something little tiny bit, like right over here around that bigger piece, but it wasn't really that big moment. So that's always interesting to me. And on the other side is people that, maybe I know a little bit about them, and I'll say, hey, if you ever want to share your story on the podcast, please let me know. And they'll be like, oh, well, nothing has changed my life. And I was like, okay, then that means you're not ready yet. But I'm willing to bet there are some pieces that really, put you in a different direction. So I think it's important for people to realize that sometimes the most seemingly small moments can be the ones that change our lives the most. What is that? That whole butterfly effect?
Yes, the trajectory of your life, right? It takes but an instant to create a moment that could change the trajectory of your life. It takes but a moment to create a dynamic that could change the present and create a new unfolding future. Now, you may not realize it in the moment, but as you reflect back, you see it. And then also, like you mentioned, which is absolutely brilliant, is that you discover the meaning of that moment unexpectedly through the process of a very beautiful conversation.
I was just thinking, like, what if you hadn't gone to Ellis's side, right? And you would have been sad that he's gone. You probably would have kept teaching your own thing. You like a lot of these things, like, or you had gone, but he was no longer able to talk, right? Like, it's always interesting to me, and sometimes it's the small decisions that we make, whether intentional or not, that also allow those moments to unfold, which I think is so cool. And it's I don't know if you're into Brene Brown. I like to talk about her a lot for some reason lately, but that whole we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Let's lean into that.
Yeah, let's lean in. Yes, yes, exactly. Where you're moved in a particular direction, right? You get called, people call it being called to action. There's something in your heart or in your inner being that says, hey, go there. Or it might be like a little whisper, right? Sometimes it's a little voice. It's different for different people. Some people see a vision, some people feel it in their heart, some people hear a voice. And to hear that call, to answer that call, say, hey, go visit that person. Hey, go have that conversation. Hey, reach out to him or her. And I think that's very much what happened during those final moments with Ellis is I answered that call. I went to go visit him, right? I reached out and I touched his hand. And after touching his hand, I asked him, "Hey, how is this feeling? Tell me how this feels for you." And we had a spiritual moment, right? It was one of those moments where everything stands still and things start to expand and you just feel a sense of awe or majesty and that you've entered this sacred space with somebody at a very vulnerable time and they welcome you, they are open to your invitation to share that moment, and they reflect back and tell you that they feel love and they're honored by your presence, and they ask you to live on by honoring the legacy that you've created together. I mean, there's lots of significant moments, but those types of moments are just so powerful.
Yeah, some of my grandmother's final words were they stick with us, and they are, I wish I hadn't worried so much because all that matters is love in the end, which I was like, you know what? I'm going to stop worrying about things and just do it,
Yeah.
right? And so that was almost like permission, right? It was this introduction to just try things. Don't worry about the outcome. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? So yeah, I agree. I mean, those moments are so special, and I hope other people get to have those moments and don't shy away from them. I think a lot of people are afraid, and I mean, it's not a fun experience, but it is very valuable. I think it's so. Thank you for sharing that. I like to wrap these calls with a question that seemingly impossible and doesn't really have an answer. So get ready for that. No, if you could speak to the version of you walking into that classroom before you met him as the person you were, what would you say to him?
Wow. Wow. I would say thank you for believing in me. Thank you for creating an opportunity to be a larger version of myself. And thank you for being who you are.
What on the other side, what would you say to yourself, that version of you that day?
Maybe, you had it in you all along, like most of
Mm,
us. And the paradoxical thing is, the person that we are looking to be has been with us all along. We just need the opportunity, the space, and the support to drop into that version of personhood so that we can unfold, expand, and become our fullest sense of who we are.
I love that. A lot of people say something very similar, but they say just trust that everything's going to turn out the way it should.
Exactly, exactly. And these are truisms that have been said in a variety of ways via different traditions, via different modalities. And I think it's just wisdom that goes back, for centuries. And we've all heard a different version of it. And I think at times sharing our stories and sharing our truth is a different phrasing of what we already
Right.
know, but that different phrasing might touch somebody in a way that resonates with them. And I think that's really the power of what we're doing through
Mm-hmm.
this conversation is naming it in a different way, calling it something else that resonates with us in our inner being very genuinely, and that genuineness then allows other people to say, wow, that totally makes sense. I never quite heard it that way before. That really hits home. And that's very beautiful.
Yeah, I think you're so right. That sometimes it's just the way things are phrased that makes all the difference. And you know that as a teacher as well. I'm sure students are like, "What do you mean?" And you're like, "Let me say it this way." And they're like, "Oh, that makes total sense."
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
You're like, "I didn't say anything different."
right.
Exactly. Yeah. So I appreciate you taking your time with me today. I loved your conversation. I think it's so great to see how people are transformed by the relationships and the connections that they make with people. And then like just taking those moments to figure out where did things slightly change for the better or improve. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been such a pleasure. It's been such a wonderful conversation. My pleasure.
Well, everyone, we will be back next week with a new episode of the Life Shift podcast. So stay tuned. Thanks again, Dr. J.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that changed lives forever. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.